Great. Thank you so much. This is Eric Lee for that. So I would like to just start the sessions by thanking for wonderful panelists and also attendees here for that. So I'm pretty sure just you will get excited about the topic. So maybe just some housekeeping rule for that. If you have any questions about or you want to ask our panelists for that, please just type that in the chat box. So in the second half of these panel discussions, but I will facilitate that one by one. So without further ado for that, maybe I want to really focus on 4 different topics with the panelists. The first topics I would like to talk about is the government and also community development. So Karuna, would you mind sharing what you are doing and also practicing and learning in India during the COVID-19 pandemic you're super proud of, and also what you would like to share with us? At the same time, what challenges and also opportunities you observe during the pandemic? Please, Karuna.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me over. Good morning to everyone. Let me start my discussion with 2 articles that were released yesterday. One was published in New York Times, and the other one was an article published by World Economic Forum. The New York Times article says, post-COVID, will the cities disappear? And the World Economic Forum's article says, it's not about the location of a city. It's not about the location of a city, but it's about the behavior of people in the city that has taught COVID adaptation. So let me kind of rest my observations on these 2. We know that COVID has impacted the world and it has taken us on a roller coaster ride. But I'm compelled to say that cities are not going anywhere. Cities will stay, they will continue to stay. Cities will not disappear. In fact, my guess is cities will get better and better. Now, let me substantiate this. Earlier, a century ago, when we had other pandemics, like let's say a bubonic plague, our cities started looking at the underground drainage. That's when we had better infrastructure. When the world was hit with Spanish flu, tuberculosis, cholera, the cities started looking at ventilation and looking at clean air, looking at open spaces. The cities started planning themselves very well in such a way that even the building codes were changed in many cities to survive tuberculosis. So the pandemics earlier actually helped cities develop the infrastructure. Now coming to COVID-19, we will have improvements in the way we design our cities, we plan our cities, the way we aggregate our human assets and institutions. Not only that, we will definitely improve what we call as the soft infrastructure. What is soft infrastructure? It is nothing but governance. We will try and look at better governance models. We will connect more deeper with our citizens. We'll try to bring in more citizen centricity into our policy and planning. So I'm quite optimistic about post-COVID cities. The cities are not going to disappear or go anywhere. Now coming to what we did in my country. Now this is where I need to get the World Economic Forum's article that says that it's not the location. Like, for instance, we live in India and our cities are so congested. But the article is so insightful. It says that it's not where you live, but how you behave. So it can be you can be in a New York or a Nebraska. You can be in a London or maybe Lhasa, maybe in a Hong Kong or Hanoi. It doesn't matter. What matters, COVID categorically proved, is your behavior. Now, let me start from there and tell you how we behaved and how the soft infrastructure like our governance helped India. Now, helped India in the sense, as you know, India has announced the lowest death rates We are a country that is so huge, 1.3 and more billion people, but our death rate is so low. Now, why is that so? That's because when our prime minister announced a lockdown, now look at the behavior of people in the cities. What we understand in cities is people are very vibrant, individualistic. They want to, they want to break rules, etc. But when my prime minister announced lockdown, strangely, everybody complied. Unlike maybe in most other cities where people hit the streets and said, we want our freedom, etc., we just complied. Notwithstanding our education, notwithstanding our intellectual prowess, people just complied. So behaviorally, we were aligned with our prime minister's vision. The second thing is when our prime minister looked at, we didn't have masks, we didn't have PPE kits. So we sat down and thought of three very important things. The first one we thought of was we have to do what is called as repurpose. The three operative words, one is repurpose, the other is heuristic. We decided we cannot cast anything in stone because we don't know how the pandemic is going to pan out. So we stuck to that heuristic word. And the third one is we thought of stretch your imagination, stretch your resources. So these were our operative words during the entire pandemic. Now let me explain quickly what they meant. Yeah. So when I say that repurpose, across the world, everybody was talking about repurposing drugs. They said a drug that cured epilepsy, a drug that cured perhaps a bulimia is actually going to help cure COVID. So that is repurposing of drugs. But we repurposed people, we repurposed institutions. In a city that was thriving with, let's say, educational institutions meant for education, we turned them into laboratories, took them into areas that they never understood what, for instance, it was a higher educational institution like IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, that worked on the PPE kits that could breathe. So move to the material science aspect, keeping aside their artificial intelligence, so we repurposed them into something completely different. Then our defense manufacturers, some of our, I come from a city where defense establishments are very high. It's a thriving city with the aerospace industry, defense. Now they started manufacturing masks. They started manufacturing PPE kits. So we repurposed those and they started delivering goods. So our educational institutions came out with test kits, that was so quick, like on the go. So through my, let's say presentation on what we did in India and in our cities, you will hear only one word: innovate on the go. Like we were just completely innovating on the go. Now, the second thing going after repurpose was what I mentioned is heuristic. We realized that nothing is cast in stone. What we thought we knew yesterday, we don't know today. Be it the infection, be it the spread, be it the intensity. We were just not in a position to put our finger on and quantify that this is the problem. So we decided we're not going to cast anything in stone. And we decided to stay heuristic in our decisions. Now, just one example I'll give you. I work closely with doctors because urban health, I work in cities, urban health is very critical. So what we understood was the doctors were having extreme difficulties when they intubated these patients and put them on ventilators. You would have seen in all your countries also. They put the tracheal tube and put them to the ventilator, and most of them died. And we realized at that time, it is because the pressure from ventilator was so high, it is hitting it at a high pressure and the lungs are already compromised, they're collapsing and they're dying. So what we did is, this is very important because we are speaking from a city perspective where innovation is, cities are epicenters of innovation. So what we thought immediately was, we cannot have ventilators. We need to have respirators. And we worked on this entire spectrum of ventilator to respirator and came out with even hybrid machines quickly for patients on at different levels of the spectrum. So my prime minister launched something called innovation labs. So most of them were attached to institutions, educational institutions, even schools. Everybody had a tinkering lab and everybody was practicing 3D printing. So quickly we came out with this, heuristic. We started innovating on the go. And the third one is about stretching our resources and stretching our imagination. Oh, we had done phenomenally well there. I remember most of our startup community just jumped in. We have in our startups, we also have a couple of unicorns in the space of health. So medical diagnostics was absolutely brilliant. We used artificial intelligence, we used machine learning, we used big data and spot diagnosis and diagnosis on the go. So these are the three things that we did. Now, let me just conclude and say that why we are kind of a success story today, because today we are giving away our medicines to the entire world. 160 countries, I think we supplied our medicines, etc. We are the second largest PPE producer in the world today, having started with nothing. Now, why did all this happen? It happened because of extreme agility in decision making. And we had an inherent advantage that in India today, we have all the 4 industrial revolutions operational. Industry 1, right from steam engine to the 4th industrial revolution that speaks about disruptive and edge technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and today fog computing. We have straddled all these 4. That's the advantage that India has. So we could deploy, those archaic old technologies and still play around with the contemporary technologies. And we had something quite tangible in terms of our results. So cities are not going anywhere. We are there to stay. And number 1, behavior is categorically important. COVID will change cities in a great way, focusing more on the soft aspects of governance, soft infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karuna, so much for that. It's great to hear your perspective about the governance, and also is talking about like being agile and innovative and imaginative is so important during the pandemic for that. So maybe we can shift to another topic, and then so Saibal, maybe you can talk about a little bit like the second-tier cities, and then would you like to share your views on the future of second-tier cities and also the regions after the pandemic? So if time allows for that, so maybe you can also talk about artificial intelligence and how it impact the cities and also our future for that. Saibal, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Karuna, for giving us some insight about cities not going anywhere. That's true, because cities, as the historians would say, is the greatest invention of humankind. And I think it is, to me, it's the greatest aspirations. So cities are not going anywhere because over 80% of the world's GDP is coming from cities. So saying that cities will change as a COVID, but every time we have such situations, we make some adjustment. Now, what COVID has done to us is we have started realizing that we don't need to live like a packed sardines in one place. In the morning, we take trains and buses and cars, go one direction, and the evening, like herds and sheep, to come back home, right? So that trend has to change, right? So what we have realized is that we had started the digitization of economy, of society and everything for quite some years, but COVID has basically accelerated it for 10 times. So what we have realized is that, wow, we can actually be spread out and stay at home, not really move around too much, and yet we could get what all we want in our aspirations as a human being. Say, for example, let's talk about education. We are talking about jobs and housing. We're talking about healthcare and safety, security. And then the only thing that COVID has actually put a damp on is probably what we call our personal what do you call is aspirations, that like going to clubbing, going to this and going to that with different ages, right? So what I'm trying to say is that as a result of that phenomena, people start thinking, why not move out? I mean, Singapore is different. You don't have second tier, third tier cities, but I'm talking about larger or medium sized. Let's just, for example, Malaysia. Let's talk about Indonesia. They will have a lot of second tier cities. Now, the issue about second tier city is only one, because naturally, whenever there is a pressure on population, let's talk about one of our project in Australia, is that people say, no more basically new development, let's say in CBD in Melbourne, right? We can always say situation in probably in Kuala Lumpur. So what you do is actually you release land outside, okay? Now what happens is developers, they will actually find where infrastructure is already there, okay? And cities have the infrastructure and try to build something on top so that my cost is low. Because going outside somewhere, it costs everyone a lot, right? Now that is where actually the only issue is, but that optimization using AI and other technique, which would have taken, let's say, 5 years ago, maybe a couple of years to figure it out, which is the optimum part of land. With new technologies, it may take probably an hour actually to figure out what is the best place for the land to build something where infrastructure is there, and yet we don't have to be congested. So that's the combination of how digital technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these will help us to optimize between what you call is developers' need for profitability, communities' need for livability, resilience, and inclusion, and also you talk about the tension that goes on, and also the governance, for example, the municipalities and then city administration need for providing the basic needs evenly to everyone. So that's what you basically, so it has given us to cut, I mean, to basically what I'm trying to say is that because of COVID has given us enough time to believe that technology is here to make our lives better, and we don't have to live like a sardines, and we can still spread out, go to the smaller towns, and yet probably do probably everything that we have been doing in living in cities and breathe fresher air.
Great, wonderful, Saibal, for that. Just like, no, it's wonderful is to seeing your articulations for that. I think in the past decades, but that the whole world is really talk about like urban densifications for that. So increasing the densities to make sure it just like is cost effectiveness, but now you just like bring in very different perspective because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That actually that the second tier cities should be kind of considered in the regional plannings developments, but that
and that will create more jobs. That will create different technology, different methods and different tools, how to basically build infrastructure in smaller cities and yet integrate with the main cities. So we would see the end of these monocentric cities, and we will see the cities being very polycentric. Now, these things were academically, I mean, we all knew it. When you ask, and I asked the planner, why are you still doing the same thing? He says, the developer, the investor, still wants us to do what we were doing in 1960s because there is money there. And that has to slowly, the habit will change. And we need to find, as the government regulation, new regulation come in, the developer has to find a way that, yes, how do we basically spread out? And those are so there is a governance issue, there is an aspiration of humankind issue, and then there is other stuff. They all come together. And we believe that the technology can be used both as an enabler and a tool to sort out. We're much to see, and this is what I believe that that's what I see the future of the cities would be, more like a polycentric cities rather than monocentric.
That's great for that. Thank you so much, Saibal, for that. So maybe I would like to invite our third panelist for that, and Richard for that. So can you tell us what you are doing in Shanghai around education and also business?
Hi, Eric. Are you able to hear me? Good, great. We had some technical difficulties. As you see, I'm dressed far more warmer than our speakers before. I'm so jealous of you guys. I have joined a few seminars, a few webinars, and I've not been speaking much about COVID, post-COVID, and situation around COVID. I've been just really talking about the kind of work that we are moving forward. I've been away for 9 months, and maybe I'll just share very quickly. I know we have about 5-10 minutes. I think actually it has been the most amazing 9 months confinement that I've had with my other half in Kyoto and Hong Kong. I've never had better reach out to good friends, good people. I think this whole Zoom period has really taught us to reach out to the right people, have deeper conversation, and really co-learn and co-create in many ways. And I came back to Shanghai about two and a half months ago, really full steam running, because I've left a lot of projects and a lot of people behind. And to my big surprise, Shanghai has really quite well recovered. There are very few cases of COVID, and people are extra careful, but in public, because everywhere we've been tested, people are not wearing masks very much. And recently I've decided with my other half that we should definitely just even watch out for ourselves and for people around us, because this is also the time of influenza. We're working in a few different areas in the space of wellness, in the space of education. We're working with a number of cities, and also commercially. We started a project to really to test an experimentation of how do you take digital, how do you take sustainability, KOL, messaging, social media, and all various different pieces of things that we've come in contact with, including advertising, architecture, interior design, and combine all that for experience. And so this project has launched. It is called TXY High. It's in Shanghai. And to our big surprise, it has been what Chinese call the black horse. It is running at full speed, and it is getting the attention of government, of quite a few parties. And I promised Eric, and I will talk a little bit about Wuhan. Wuhan has suffered quite a bit, but at the same time, because of its 60 few days of total shutdown, it has now become probably the cleanest city in China. And because of the reputation and everything else, central government of Beijing has given a significant fund for Wuhan to come back. And we're very lucky to be part of that funding. And we're working with the local planning board and local city government. Wuhan has 89 universities. I thought Tita and Bandung and Yogyakarta has a lot, but Wuhan itself has 89 universities, 1.3 million students. 80% of them leave Wuhan after graduation, even way before COVID was a problem, was a situation. Now the situation is, how do we find a way to take a fund that is given to us, to take parts of the city and modify, change it, as creatively, as radically creatively as possible, to bring life back to the city. So I'm taking all that I've learned working with Shanghai City. The 10 year ago was the World Expo. Our university helped plan it. And also 10 years ago, we were given the UNESCO City of Design Award. So basically, what in 10 years, what with this kind of momentum, how can a city change? So we're taking some of that knowledge, applying to Wuhan, and also asking the big question: what positive change and positive explosion can happen after 2020. I'll tell a very quick story. I may have 1 minute left. I heard a conversation between two people I respect a lot, and they're saying, when in the last 50 years was there something like pandemic, like COVID? And the answer, they couldn't come up with anything except one of them said, maybe 1986, 1988, with the AIDS epidemic. At that time, it was indiscriminately, many people was affected, country were affected, and most important, the creative industries were affected. But within that period, years and years after, was the greatest explosion of creativity, of ideas in music, dance, education, platforms. That's where Burning Man started. That's when TED Talks originally first started. So within that culture, within that kind of situation, a lot of people have pains, have difficulty. They find other ways to express it. They do the best they can. So the question I ask to ourselves constantly within our students and within our creative bodies is, how can we really push ourselves and understand what's going to come out of 2020? And how can we take all the great conversations we've had this year, really connect the dots, really find the best opportunities to make things, because a lot of barriers have been cut, a lot of testing has diminished in time, so that innovations can happen easier, medical, biomed situations can move faster. And I think it is probably within the few things around education, around wellness, around cities, around urban, rural. A lot of people in China, in big cities, have actually moved to the countryside. That's great. For the first time, the question has long time been, how do we bring talents to second, third, fourth, fifth tier cities? And I think I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that. Just like that's wonderful. And also I can see some kind of overlappings when Karuna is talking about like the pandemic forced the city to change. It's really kind of a glad you talk about like Wuhan is now becomes the cleanest cities in China, likely for that. And also you talk about the retention and also the recruitment components for that, and also the potential boom of the creative industry for that. So I think there's really a lot of opportunities. So, but we might go back to some of this topic, but I would like to invite our fourth speakers and then Tito to really talk about like some things about education and also future of work for that. Tito, I wonder whether you can share your views with us about the future of creative economy, youth, and also the future of work. I know you have a slide deck to share. Please go ahead to do that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Yeah, I need my visuals to accompany me here, but my point is maybe my viewpoint is all from the community side, community initiatives that will form my argument later. So, well, this is about my city, Bandung, where I'm from. Usually it's famous for the Asia-Africa Conference in 1955, which is the first international conference for Asia and Africa countries as the non-bloc meeting, and it has the Declaration of World Peace and so on, that we still carry this spirit today. And as Richard mentioned before, there are lots of universities in Bandung. We have about 120. So young people come here and they're dominating the population of Bandung, and they've been doing things, and they have become actually who determines the city or the dynamic of the city and how the city can go, because they outnumber everyone, even the government. And for example, this group of people, which is Bandung Creative City Forum, we've been creating prototypes in urban size, and we always work with different stakeholders, and we see the city as an organic entity, and that's how we see it. And we always have to realize that actually we are just a small fraction of the city, and we don't have that much resources, not as much as the government, for example, or the private sectors. But as long as we do things even small, but then really impactful, and if we do it consistently, then we believe that we can change the city to to fit our decisions more. So we see that design is a way of thinking to solve urban issues. So not only design is not only about nice things or aesthetically pleasing, but it's also a way of thinking that manages to create values and meanings according to actual needs and context of the local people. And we see creativity as a strategy actually to lessen the gap between people and government, people and policy, and among all stakeholders. And then we see prototypes as a rapid solution that can be done by anyone, it can be committed by anyone. And by this concept, then we applied for the City of Design of UNESCO Creative Cities Network, and we joined the network in 2015. And ever since, we keep doing what we did. So these are just examples of what I meant by urban scale prototypes. So we did experiments with urban arts, bike sharing system, and this is all run by community with the purpose that our government see that this is actually the city we want. This is how we like the city to be run. So also about urban mobility, urban forest, kampung development, even entrepreneurship, of course, environment and artifacts. And later we do a lot with youth and urban games and using digital and also treating the city as a living lab actually. So through these games, although it seems seemingly very playful, but actually we want to raise the empathy for these young people so they know, they realize how the city is actually outside their environment of comfort, school, and maybe mall and cafes, but there are more to that. And because they're the ones who will be holding the city 20, 30 years from now. So they have to have experience in that. And then this is how we engage with, especially with government and decision makers. So every year we have this design thinking workshop with a theme that is urgent to Bandung then. And every workshop comes out with recommendations that can be done either by the government or by the communities and other stakeholders, but at least we know in the future what we can do together. So the government still have their own system to do this planning, but then with this kind of design thinking workshop where there's no hierarchy in there, so everybody is the same, we're all people, we're all citizens, but at least after this workshop, people can then emerge as their own roles and actors in their own societies. And then suddenly the whole world was forced to pause. Of course, we cannot stay like this for too long, and everybody want to move on, but how? So again, the strength of community proved that they can actually work faster than the government, especially considering Indonesia has 17,000 islands, 200-something million people, and so on. So when the government was actually still working on the data and who to receive helps and so on, I also active in Indonesia Creative Cities Network, where 220 cities and regencies already gathered, but on behalf of the communities. And we already gathered all these helps and all this data and all classes and so on in the mitigation and survival phase of the COVID. So through our Solidarity Act. And then concerning the economic activity, everything has to stop because mostly Indonesia, especially looking at the SMEs and the informal economy sectors, micro industries and so on, of course, there are lots of loss. So this 80% of average loss of SMEs, tens of thousands of people got laid off and so on. But then there is also a trend that there are increases in e-commerce engagement, streaming consumption, food delivery services, logistic, and so on. And then we also see increases in, for example, people choose health products or comfort fashion because they start working from home. They want to be comfortable, but looking professionals at the same time. And then people start to choose a healthier lifestyle, choose what they eat, how to reduce packages when they deliver stuff, and so on and so on. So this actually has become the source of SMEs when they start to shift, and it's easy for them because they are small operations that have this, like mentioned before, extreme agility, but then this is from the bottom up. And then we have momentum in the near future because this 2020 in U20 Summit and G20 actually, there is a policy recommendation on inclusive creative economy and the future of work. ICCN has been working with U20, which is Urban 20 or mayors of G20 countries. And this is the argument that actually creative economy can provide inclusive field of work and so on. And then in 2022, Indonesia will host G20 Summit. So if this recommendation is accepted, then I think G20 countries will also try to look into creative economy and so on. And another momentum is that in 2021, the UN has declared this as the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. And of course, when they declared that, we didn't know about COVID at all. But then now, even more so, this can be a momentum where we can prove that this informal economy, cultural-based economy, and so on, actually has a chance to really thrive for human beings in the future. And in 2021 as well, there will be the World Conference on Creative Economy, twice even, because the one in Dubai was actually postponed from this year, sorry. And then we'll have the second one in Bali in about May, and then in Dubai along with the World Expo. So this is actually a wrap-up model of the policy recommendation about inclusive creative economy and the future of work. ICCN is partnering with U20 in producing this model. So if you see the human being, the blue one in the middle, that's the human-centered development that we would like to see. And if we want to go to achieve the SDG, we have to go through all these years still. But then there's this COVID and all these phases of handling it, of coping with it. And it's different in every city, in every country. Sometimes you already get to the recovery part, but then the second wave come again, the third wave, and so on. Reestablishing and redeveloping and actually redefining, as mentioned before, also maybe repurposing what you actually do. And in order to do so, because we have a domination of young people, they should also create works. But then this work in creative economy sectors, in creative industries, usually are the ones who provide work that can be inclusive. And as you can see, the AG and BNF, A is academic institution, research institutions, or work of vocational school and so on, that can give as a pipeline for these people to create themselves through any kind of technology. Government also provide policies and so on. These numbers actually refer to the whole, the complete definition or the complete description of how they relate to each other, which you can download at the site of Urban 20 Riyadh, as you can see at the corner. So this is my last slide, which is actually arguing that if we want to move on, and if we want to take over the future in what we want, we have these opportunities if we, especially if we work in the creative economy sector or cultural-based economy, that we usually have high-order cognitive skills. So we tend to look into originality. We don't want to be the same as others. We want to stand out. So we actively seeking out new business ideas to enhance various traditional services, to become more personal experience-oriented with unique narratives. And people who work in creative economy usually have this technology savviness. So there's an agility in combining or mastering advanced technology that has become indispensable in creative industries, products, and services. And the third is if we usually work in communities and so on, we have this skill that characterize ourselves. So there's an ability of interpersonal characteristic. So we tend to look into no longer as a title of what we are, but as who we are and how do we, what's our role is in society or in your nearest circle. So your profession is no longer, for example, I'm a designer or I'm a lecturer, no longer like that anymore. But then I can see that myself maybe as a connector or as an inspirator and so on. But the challenges is always there, the adequate systemic support in the form of policy and regulations at city level, because we know that activity, technology, and so on, especially from the bottom up, they move faster than policies and so on, which has to catch up if they want to be able to implement them according to what we want. Thank you. That's all from me.
That's wonderful details for that. So, well, we do have a few minutes for that. We do have numbers of questions. So what I would suggest for that, just I pick a few questions we've mentioned earlier for that, invite the panelists to respond. So if we have to finish the panels on time for that, I would highly encourage you to kind of keep connecting with us through the LinkedIn and also the LAC platform. So we look forward for that. So the first question is from Japanese for that is to Karuna for that. And how do you prepare your community to decide your desired behavior? So what frameworks did you utilize? Please go ahead, Karuna.
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, that the entire country complied with what the Prime Minister requested us to do. And for that, we had very little preparation time. Now, there was no scientific tool per se, but what worked very well for us was the persuasive communication that my prime minister used. Periodically, in fact, at the very beginning, he would come and persuade the entire population, 1.3 billion people, about the severity of the problem and what it could do to personal lives, families, and how economy can be affected and how we have to stay put at homes. And so the persuasive communication broadcasted to the entire country helped a lot. Then we used several other channels of dissemination. We made certain apps using technology. So we deployed whatever resources we had. One is intellectual, the other is artful way of reaching people. Then we had small folk discussions around, street corner discussions to talk about how important it is. So if any one of you is trained in this development communication protocols, you segment the entire audience. And you use a certain type of conversation. Like for educated people, you give statistics, data, and logic. For those who are at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of education, then you use storytelling, drama, film. So we used multiple methods to reach out to people, and that's why we got compliance and the behavioral modifications that we wanted.
So we have I hope you answered your questions, but thank you so much, Karuna, for that. So the next question actually is going to Saibal for that. So when the city is the best positions for the future, revolving around what you mentioned for this is a polycentric, is a multimodal model for that. So the Vince is posed these questions for that. So how do you think about country with less financial resources can position themselves well for the future while we are following this model? Saibal, would you share some of your view?
Thank you for the question. I think this is it's kind of a perennial problem, and it is a very profound question. And every city, everywhere in the world is the same discussion for the last many years that I entered into this field. But let me take it short. So that's how. Urban ethic, we basically is a urbanization, urbanism, and technology. So our idea was these things are so complicated. So for example, you have sustainability issue, which is a resilient, environmental sustainability. And then you have basically what you call is inclusiveness, another issue in some cities. Then you have a development feasibility issue because it has to be financially feasible, okay? So that's another issue that you work with. Then you have the third one, which is infrastructure demand, basically. Do we have the infrastructure capacity? Okay, so that's another issue. Forget about those jobs and other stuff. This is what I trust technology, and the reason is that I've been in it for 40 years of my life, right? And when people say, oh, automation is going to take away the job, I disagree. I started my career designing unmanned factories, right? I was just 28, 29-year-old, maybe even younger. But you look at the history from that and now, world has created far more jobs. Look at the number of jobs we created in 1980s and now, right? So there's always an adjustment humans make. Now, coming back to the question, what you're saying is that's where technology helps us. The problem that technology had earlier on is we were automating the existing mess. And that is not what we want, right? That means we're creating more waste at a very high speed. What we need is optimization, and that's why the newer technologies are coming in. So we are taking number of issues that individual level, community level, government level have, and trying to optimize between them. And it's absolutely possible to have a city. The only thing is where we saw that the utopia that we are looking for has only one issue, and that is finance for the construction developer. Now, that's what my personal opinion is, that this industry, the AEC industry, the what we call architecture, engineering, construction industry, today is the least productive. The only industry that is more productive than is agriculture. AC industry is less than 0.5% the productivity rate is. But yet, everybody becomes a developer, becomes very rich, right? The issue is that we need to change those structures in a way that why not it becomes another automotive industry, another pharmaceutical industry, another food industry that investors are happy with 10% return or 11% return. Why somebody has to be so rich and somebody has to be too poor? Look at the construction workers, right? So there will be a huge structural change that we will go through between planning, so this life cycle thing, which is your plan, design, construct, and manage, right? And all these 4 segments are interlinked, and yet we are very poor in that. So what we have basically learned from digitization, that we practice the Zoom era, that yes, there is a hope that these digitization and AI is not going to take our job, but actually help us to understand the complexity and actually come out with a better solution. Now, I can go on and how it is done in modeling that we do, right? Say, for example, I'm giving you an example. I can actually do some modeling in our software. We call it SimCity in real life. And just say, if I take this, developer make this much of money, this make, however, there is not much job. Look at some of the smart cities coming up with the look at the fancy building. Do we really need those buildings? No. So that is where the technology will kind of I believe that make it, I call it optimization, right? So that's what we are looking for. That means the developers are happy, the government is happy, the city administration happy, individual citizens are happy. And what all cities want? We want our cities to be magnets for people to live and magnets for business to invest and work. And I think for me, based on our experience, that yes, creative cities, fantastic, but not every city will be centered around creativity, right? So what will happen is some city will be science oriented, some city will be art oriented, some cities will have some tourism oriented. So there will be some small DNAs that we have to discover our own city based on what capacity we have, capacity of people, capacity of land, capacity of many other things. Now that is complexity, and this is where I believe the younger generation should come up and bring those technology and work that, because as I said, cities are the greatest invention and the aspiration of humankind. I hope I answered that in a short while, a short moment. But I think this is where we need to think more. I won't say we don't need to be radical, actually. We just need to be rational, I would say.
That's wonderful for that. It just really give us a lot of thought. Well, I just got an overtime notice, but then we have an extra 5 minutes for our panel for that. So I hope you kind of still posting your questions, but we try to handle that or find a way to handle that.
Eric,
yes, go ahead.
May I follow up just a couple
Please,
minutes with Saibal? I agree absolutely perfectly that different cities have different DNA for different specialization. At the bottom of my heart, because I'm from the culture, design, innovation area, I actually believe that the city needs to be balanced. Right now, for the recent decade, we see far more investment, far more attention put into infrastructure, technology, and I feel many cities are not balanced enough. You're very right. We need to be magnet. It is really about the branding, the image of the place, to separate different identity, different city. But most of all is the desirability of what we create as environment around us. I'm looking at, we mentioned a little bit about how Penang, out of total surprise, graffiti and street art became a very important component of bringing tourists to Penang, just entirely out of the government's control, and suddenly the government will play along the game and say, you know what, it does work. It is as good as the Chai Kway Teow, But I think that's the kind of balance that we always want to find a way that it has the right technology, it has the right humanism to make people to really. I think the big word actually is the enjoyment of life in the city. That will attract talent, a combination of different people, because technologists without culture, without design, will not be very enjoyable technology. I think that combination of that, we all know how many cities are there in the world, especially in China. Great infrastructure, buildings built, theater built, entirely empty, because it has not thought about the most powerful factor, the human factor, the enjoyable factor. So I think that's the area that Southeast Asia and many developing countries actually have. They have an amazing attractiveness. Now find ways to balance it. Tell that story, how beautiful it is, how good the nature is, how much variety there is to live, and put in and bring in the technologists, because they have choices to go anywhere else. So can we have some great thinking polymaths or coders to come in to solve certain problems? That was another thing that Santiago, Chile has done very well. Berlin has done very well. It is a great place to live first, inexpensive to live, and then you can create because there's good people around you. I stop here. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you so much for that. Just night. Well, it's 12:06. I just probably do my timekeeper / moderator job for that. So I know that there's a lot of wonderful conversations here, and also would like to take this opportunity to thank you, the organizing committee, giving us a wonderful putting together this wonderful panel. And also hope the attendees for that you enjoy, and also keep thinking about what the panelist is talking about today. So keep thinking about, because you are going to build our future, you're going to build our communities, our country for that. So I would like to really thank you all the 4 wonderful panelists, your time and also your wonderful insights, and thank you so much for that. So again, just like we will run into each other's on Facebook, LinkedIn, or wherever platform we are talking about the digital for that. So keep the conversations is going these couple of days, and don't stop after these 2 days as well for that. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.